And then I looked at another paragraph and it begins, Abai deliberated cautiously. Start there, or we could start with Abai awoke in a state of wonder. You want that one? You're wondering what that might be. Okay. Hopefully, yeah. Oh, hold on. See, then you've got to go further back to wonder why. Yeah. One night, we'll go from here. This chapter is called A Resident of Vrindavan. One night, Abai had a striking dream. The same dream he had had several times before during his days as a householder. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared just as Abai had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyasi coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abai and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly he called and motioned. He was asking Abai to take sannyas. Come, he urged, become a sannyasi. Abai awoke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instruction Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had given him at their first meeting in Calcutta. The same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter. Become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the Western world. Sannyas was for that end. Otherwise, why would his spiritual master have asked him to accept it? Abai reasoned that his spiritual master was saying, quote, now take sannyas and you will actually be able to accomplish this mission. Formerly, the time was not right. End quote. Abai deliberated cautiously. By accepting sannyasa, Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind, and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, renouncing all other engagements. He was doing that already. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had offered sannyas to his leading disciples so that they could continue his mission. They hadn't done it. Preaching in the West had proved perilous even for the Gaudiya Mat's most recognized sannyasis. How could he, a mere householder, presume he could succeed where the others had failed? He was hesitant. The helpless and capable feeling he had expressed in his Varaha Ashtaka was there, the prayer that Srila Prabhupada composed. But now his spiritual master was beckoning him over all other considerations, even over natural humility. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach just as his spiritual master had preached remained within him. A fierce thought sometimes quietly expressed determination. Okay, so we could read all morning on this. It would be quite interesting. You want to pick up the story, it's page 216, Prabhupada's Vilamrita. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Without whom we would not be sitting here, and God only knows where we'd be. It's something you would call hypothetical thinking, isn't it? To think where we might be. We do know the sages in the forest, the story where they say that Purnam Musika Bhava. Again, you become a mouse. So certainly we would be mouse-like creatures, very insignificant in the material world. We used to have a term you might have heard, I don't know if they use it anymore, it's when a devotee leaves the shelter of Krishna, we used to call it blooping. That was the term. Where's such and such? Oh, they blooped. And the term blooped comes from when you throw a stone high in the air, you might expect it to come down with a great splash. But if it's a small stone, if you throw it high in the air, it makes a noise when it enters the water. Bloop. It just goes bloop. So when when we have the idea of re-entering the material arena, we think we're going to make a big splash. We'll get back into the material world, somehow get it together. Bloop. Nothing. We're so insignificant. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, chapter 22, text number 43. Nishpaditas chat karchnyena. Nispaditas cha karchnyena. Bhagavad Virgrinalubihi Sadhu Chishtam He Me Sarvam Atmana Saha Kim Dade Nishpaditas cha karchnyena Bhagavad Virgrinalubi Sadhu Chishtam He Me Sarvam Atmana Saha Kim Dade Nishpaditas cha karchnyena Bhagavad Virgrinalubi Sadhu Chishtam He Me Sarvam Atmana Saha Kim Dade. Ladies, please. Nispaditacha. Also, the order is properly carried out. Kachyena in full. Bhagavad be by the representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Grinalu bihi by the most compassionate. Sadhu Uchitam remnants of the foodstuffs of saintly persons. He certainly may mind sarvam everything atmana heart and soul saha with kim what dade shall give. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: My dear Brahmana, you have carried out the order thoroughly because you are also as compassionate as the Lord. It is my duty, therefore, to offer you something. But all I possess are but remnants of food taken by great saintly persons. What shall I give? Purport. The words sadhuchishtam is significant in this verse. Ritu Maharaj got his kingdom from great saintly persons like Brigu and others, just as one gets remnants of food. After the death of King Vena, the whole world was bereft of a popular ruler. There were so many catastrophes occurring that the great saintly persons headed by Brigu created the body of King Prithu out of the body of his dead father, King Vena. Since King Prithu was thus offered the kingdom by virtue of the mercy of great saintly persons, he did not want to divide his kingdom among saints like the Kumaras. When a father is eating food, he may, out of compassion, offer the remnants of his food to his son. Although such food may be already chewed by the father, it cannot be offered to the father again. Prithu Maharaj's position was something like this. Whatever he possessed had already been chewed, and therefore he could not offer it to the Kumaras. Indirectly, however, he offered everything he possessed to the Kumaras, and consequently, they utilized his possessions in whatever way they liked. The next verse clarifies this matter. Anybody interested in hearing the next verse? A little tricky. Somebody else is going to speak tomorrow on that, but I think for making things a little more complete, we might have to look at this next verse. At least we can have a look at it. I'll read the translation. The king continued, therefore, my dear Brahmanas, my life, wife, children, home, furniture, and household paraphernalia. Furniture used to be quite valuable, by the way. You didn't get it at Kmart or down at the warehouse or wherever you would get it. Furnishings were something quite, they were passed down through generations practically because they were valuable. It was created by all these primitive people that used to live before modern civilization evolved into this wonderful place where everything is disposable and can be thrown into the rubbish tip. Anyway, these are mentioned as opulences, great opulences. So my home, my children, furniture, and household paraphernalia, my kingdom, strength, land, and especially my treasury are all offered unto you. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In some readings, the word daraha is not used, but the word used then is raya, which means wealth. In India, there are still wealthy persons, and the word dharaha means, I think, wife. It gets quite complicated. The Srimad Bhagavatam is, it's for, thinking. We have to be quite thoughtful to get our heads into the Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada's purport, in some readings, the word dharaha, wife, is not used, but the word used then is raya, which means wealth. So you could say, in one context, a wife is a great wealth. Yes? Ladies agree with that? Is that okay? The men agree with that? You have to be very careful these days because it's such an advanced civilization we live in. You don't know what to say and how to say it, who will be offended and who will be defending, and so it goes on. So the word of dara is not used in wealth, raya. In India, there are still wealthy persons who are recognized by the state as raya. A great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was called Ramananda Raya because he was governor of Madras and very rich. There are still many holders of the title Raya. Raya Bahadur, Raya Chaudhary, and so on. The dhara, or wife, is not permitted to be offered to the Brahmanas. Everything is offered to worthy persons who are able to accept charity, but nowhere is it found that one offers his wife. Therefore, in this case, the reading Raya is more accurate than Dhara. Also, since Prithu Maharaj offered everything to the Kamaras, the word kosha, or treasury, need not be separately mentioned. Kings and emperors used to keep a private treasury which was known as Ratnabhanda. The Ratnabhanda was a special treasury room which contained special jewelries, such as bangles, necklaces, and so on, which were presented to the king by the citizens. This jewelry was kept separate from the regular treasury house, where all the collected revenues were kept. Such a wonderful culture. The subtlety is what is important to catch in all of this, the subtle nuances of cultural human civilization. So Prabhupada's pointing this out in the purport, that those things that were offered by the citizens of the king were kind of a bit different because they were given very out of great love and affection for the king. They weren't forced out, they weren't taxed away from the citizens, but voluntarily they wanted to give their wealth to the king, who has so much wealth. But they knew that the king utilizes the revenue that is given by the citizens and collected through taxation for the benefit of the people. So they give him a special gift, and then that can be kept for special things by the king. The jewelry was kept separate from the regular treasury house where all the collected revenues were kept. Thus, Prithu Maharaj offered his stock of private jewelry to the lotus feet of the Kumaras. It has already been admitted that all the king's property belonged to the Brahmanas, and that Prithu Maharaj was simply using it for the welfare of the state. If it were actually the property of the Brahmanas, how could it be offered again to them? In this regard, Sripad Sridhar Swami has explained that this offering is just like the servant's offering of food to his master. The food already belongs to the master, or the master has purchased it, but the servant, by preparing food, makes it acceptable to the master and thus offers it to him. In this way, everything belonging to Prithu Maharaj was offered to the Kumar. So this verse clarifies the verse before, I hope. That sometimes it can get a little more complicated. Om Ganati Marandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Grave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master is forcing me to open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. Offer my humble obeisances on full lotus feet. My dear Brahmana, you have carried out the order thoroughly, because you are also as compassionate as the Lord. It is my duty, therefore, to offer you something, but all I possess are the remnants of food taken by great saintly persons. What shall I give? So Sanat Kumar is being addressed by Prithu Maharaj as my dear Brahmana, and he's saying that you have carried out the order thoroughly because you are as compassionate as the Lord himself. Earlier on, the Supreme Lord appeared in the sacrificial arena of Prithu Maharaj and said that in the future, very soon I will appear, or that I will send my representatives, the Kumaras, who will instruct you in the great science of, or they will answer all your questions and instruct you in the great science of life. And Prithu Maharaj was not thinking, well, I already know the science of life. I'm a Shaktadesh avatar. Therefore, there's no need to instruct me. But he's very inspired and excited and honored that the Lord is going to make such a special arrangement for such exalted personalities as the four Kumaras to come and give him their association and give him the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So again, we get this idea of great culture. As I went back into this story, it started, I think, around the 22nd or 21st verse of this chapter. And I thought to share some of the points that were there to help us understand the subtleties of life. One is the culture and the etiquette, which is a big discussion in itself, and the even more pertinent to us, although those subtle etiquettes are very important. But we want to know, how am I going to be benefited by the Bhagavatam? Yes, we want to know that. What is this Bhagavatam all about? What are we to gain from it? And the Bhagavatam, as it unfolds, different levels, subtle levels, become evident. And as I look back into these verses, the beginning is in text 21, where it says, conclusively decided by scriptures, the ultimate goal is detachment from the bodily conception of life and increased and steadfast attachment for the Supreme Lord. So we hear that this is the place, and we find maybe ourselves at different stages in our devotional life, trying to focus very much in this idea of becoming detached from the bodily concept of life. Did we hear Srila Prabhupada speaking on this subject from time to time in the Bhagavatam? You are not this body. You are not this body. And we hear it again and again and again. We hear the same thing. And you might ask, and maybe we do ask something, why does this have to be repeated? Answer, it's a little bit like when you get up in the morning. If you think, I've had a bath for the last 364 days, and now is the last day of the year, do I have to have a bath today? Yes, you have to have a bath today. Why? Who can give me an answer? Why? Can you say it louder? And once more, louder still. Good man. We get dirty every day. We get more contaminated. It happens on a daily basis. So the Bhagavatam consistently repeats the message so that we can get the cleansing. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We have to hear the Bhagavatam regularly, and there are many messages in the Bhagavatam. One is that we are not this body. Spiritual Life 101. Also, we give the example sometimes of if you're an athlete, you can become absolutely recognized as the top gold medal winner or whatever. But when it comes the new season, you have to do your basic training. You can't say, well, hey, come on, man, I was the top man last year, so what's the problem? I can just take it easy. No, you have to do your basic training and build on it and build on it and build on it. So basic training, and then more sophisticated, then a little more sophisticated to the point where you're finely tuned. So this is what we're hearing of Prithu Maharaj, and he's showing us this example. The basic training, yes, has to be there. And that's the way the Bhagavatam is presented. We are not this body, and sense gratification is not a very good idea for being the goal of your life. Kamashana indriya pritir labho jiveta yava. Jivasya tattva jignasha nato yascheha kamavi. The human form of life should not be directed towards sense gratification. Therefore, if we have that as the goal of life, we've really missed it. So the goal of life is introduced as the increased and steadfast attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we get this idea. Then the next verse, text 22, how this is done is explained. It is done by the process of bhakti yoga. Let me think, oh, got that. I got that. I'm not the body. Sense gratification is not the goal of life. You've got to do bhakti yoga. Okay, I'll do bhakti yoga. Guess what? There's a quality of the bhakti yoga. We have to get it from the initial stages to the advanced stages. Ado Shraddha. We have a little faith and we take up the bhakti yoga process. And then we do the bhajana kriya, and there's a certain quality to the bhajana. We have to learn how to improve the quality. So we just go, yep, I'm not the body. Bhakti yoga, get the beads, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, and we kind of get on with it. But then we're reminded every day to see if we can pick up some of the subtleties. So the Bhakti Yoga process is advised. How that Bhakti Yoga process unfolds, next verse 23. One must mold his life in such a way that he cannot live in peace without Krishna Katha, without Hari Katha. We have to get to the point where we can't actually enjoy life at all unless we're hearing about Krishna and Krishna's pastimes, his paraphernalia, his entourage, his devotees. Oh, okay. That's the kind of Bhakti Yoga we got to get. That we get to the point where we can't really be very happy unless we're hearing about Krishna. Text 24. One must lead a very simple life. Oh, simple life. Oh, okay. And when we first joined the temple a while back, no beds, no hot water, no hair for the men. The ladies were okay, but they had to wash it in cold water. I remember, going back a while, my wife coming along the road from where we were living near the Melbourne Temple, and she had where the shoes up there, usually sit over there, wet hair and having to have a cold bath and all this stuff. Actually, I'm telling a lie. The ladies were allowed a warm bath, wasn't it? Was it? No. Well, they're shaking their head. No. But can you remember there was in the place we stayed, there was what do they call it? A geyser. You call it a caliphon. It wasn't very sophisticated a long time back. So, so it used to blow up. You used to have to light it. It was a gas thing, and it went, and the gas came on. So it used to blow up. Funny. So we had to live a simple life. Where is that? Sorry, I just closed that. No, yeah. But don't worry. Part of the subtle nuances is that that's not the goal of life. Tapasya is not the goal of life. Although it says in Bhagavatam that one there's so many verses, that by rendering service unto the personality of Godhead, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment and renunciation. So there's got to be detachment, there's got to be renunciation. But is that the goal? Read more. So we've got to mold our life in a way that we can't live without Harikatha. We must live a simple life. Well, what does simple mean? Big discussion. Every one of them is a big discussion, isn't it? We shouldn't eat too much. We shouldn't eat too little. How much is too much? 10 chapatis someone can eat. Somebody eats 2 chapatis. What's too much for the person who eats 2 chapatis? 3? Maybe. And for a person that eats 10 chapatis, I don't know what's too much. 10's quite a lot, huh? So it's always adjustable. We want a blueprint for success, isn't it? If there is a blueprint, tell us the blueprint and we'll do it. But it's not like that, isn't it? We're all individuals. We've all got a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a mixture of this and a mixture of that. And so it goes on. So we've got to learn what this is. And leading a simple life is there, but undisturbed by duality of opposing elements. Has anyone ever had opposing elements in your life? You felt that things weren't going the way you hoped they were going to go, and it seems to be that you're struggling in different ways. You got to deal with that too as you're leading your simple life, reading the Bhagavatam and not getting into sense gratification. So hang in there. We've got a little bit longer to go here. Now, the good news in text 25, it says, hearing the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is like ornamental decorations on the ears of devotees. Satam prasangam mamavirya sambuddho bhavanti ritkana. Kana is the ear. Bhavanti ritkana. By hearing the wonderful pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the association of like-minded persons, pure souls wanting to understand the absolute truth, it becomes very pleasing to the ear and very satisfying. Ritkana. Rit is the heart, so very satisfying to the heart and pleasing to the ear. And by cultivating this knowledge, one gradually advances on the path of liberation. Thereafter, one's devotion becomes fixed. And then real bhakti and devotional service begin. So it begins from day one, when we first take up here, when we first hear Hare Krishna mantra. And it doesn't stop. But the kind of devotion that we want, that kind where it's really peaceful and smooth, and you're not feeling so overwhelmed by anarthas, and you're feeling a spontaneous affection for and attraction to Krishna and Krishna consciousness. That's the kind of bhakti we want to get to. And it will come after we go across the desert of anartha nivriti. So we've got a kind of desert to get across. It's called anartha nivriti. And sometimes we think that's devotional service. I think this is it, the struggle to cross over the desert of unwanted desires and disqualifications and unnecessary things in the heart. But Bhagavatam says, no, 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 that is only part way. That's just keep going, don't go back. Because if you don't keep going, you go back, yes? Or you die. If you're going over a desert, you have to go to the other side, or you try and go back, or you stay there and die. So Bhagavatam, one person was asked recently, I was watching a video, he said, what was the secret to success in life? And I thought, this is a secret to success in bhakti also. He said, my answer was 3 words. Start. Don't stop. 3 words. Start. Don't stop. So you got to get started and keep going. And if we poke our head into the Bible, we'll get inspired. Inspiration will be there for us to continue. So these pastimes that we hear become very pleasing to the ear and satisfying the heart. And you think it might end there, but it says in text 26 and 27, becoming fixed in devotional service, one awakens knowledge and detachment. Oh, that's pretty good. Automatically, by rendering devotional service, you get knowledge and detachment. And what happens when we get really a lot of knowledge and detachment? We start to enter into another level, which is that we no longer see ourselves as separate. Now, this is tricky part, because the Mayavadis get this wrong. They get it that there's no difference completely. We are God, we are all God, and we all merge into that oneness. But the oneness in text 25 that the Kumaras are explaining to Prithu Maharaj, they explain that there is differentiation that is always there. Krishna's explained this in Bhagavad Gita at the very beginning. Never was there a time that I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, Arjuna. We have all existed in the past, we're existing now, and we will continue to exist as individuals. So the oneness that is being explained by the Kumaras, the Prithu Maharaj, is the oneness where we see that I'm actually not separate from Krishna. Jivara Svarupoi Nichara Krishna Das, Krishna Tatashta Shakti. We are the Tatashta Shakti, we are that small spiritual spark, a part and parcel of Krishna, divine, eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. Wow. Yeah, to hear that is pretty encouraging. We're a divine spark, eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. So we push on with the Bhagavatam and we want to hear. So Prithu Maharaj is displaying this as he assimilates this knowledge from the Kumaras given by Lord Vishnu. The Kumaras having that same love and compassion because they're not feeling separate from the Lord. They demonstrate fully the mercy of the Lord. They're not different. And we also are not different. We are those parts and parcels. And Prithu Maharaj is showing that he's not feeling himself in any way separate. This is where the problem comes. We all think we're separate. So we come to the material world with this separate identity. We think, well, I am this. I am what? Back to square one. I am this body. The ahankara, the false identification of the body. Oh, but I thought we'd fix that. Oh, we find it, we slip into all these different traps and we think ourselves separate. This is my wealth. These are my possessions. This is my body, my home, my country, and so on and so forth. So Prithu Maharaj is in this verse showing that one gets to the point in devotional life where the only interest is fulfilling the desires of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's something to aspire for. Usually we'll do a little devotional service as long as my desires are okay, as long as I'm feeling pretty good and it's all good. But it's actually meant to be that only for fulfilling the desires of the Lord. In text number 30, result of continually thinking of sense objects. So this is what happens. I noticed when we got to text 30, the Bhagavatam loops back in. It loops back in and gives you another set of verses saying the same thing again, but in a different way, slightly differently presented, and begins to give you the same message. The result of continually thinking of sense objects loops back to there. One's real consciousness almost becomes lost. And they give the example, Bhagavatam gives it, like water in a lake. Those continually thinking of sense objects are like the water in a lake gradually being sucked up by big grasses or straws on its bank. So that's the power of the sense objects to suck away the consciousness from Krishna consciousness to dried up material consciousness. So it continues. When one deviates from original consciousness, I am not this body, I am eternal spirit soul, he loses capacity to remember his previous position. He loses that capacity because his consciousness is deviated, or to even recognize his present position, being stuck in the material world, thinking that I am this body and continuing doing all these things. When remembrance is lost of our real identity, all knowledge acquired is based on false foundation. It doesn't have a real foundation. So no matter how hard we try to squeeze it and shake it and move it, we're stuck. And that is explained also, that kunape tridatuke. One is thinking, Yashatmi buri kunape tridatuke, svadi kalatradishu boma ijadi, yatirta buddhi salilena karichi, janeshu abhijnesu sa eva gokara. When a person, Bhagavatam says, when a person identifies himself to be this corpse-like body made of mucus, bile, and air, to be his self, who considers his relatives and family members to be permanently his own, who considers the land of his birth to be worshipable, and who goes to a holy place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath there and not to associate with and to serve those spiritually advanced persons, he's considered to be no better than a cow or an ass. Sa eva gokara. So we slip back into this material consciousness. Then it continues. Thinking, it's the strongest obstruction, this false identification. Thinking other things more pleasing than self-realization. When we think that we can find some happiness or pleasure in the material world more than self-realization, we're in a really difficult situation. The human society is ruined by a mentality. Prabhupada goes on to explain in the next verse. Human society is ruined by the mentality of working to earn money for sense gratification. Therefore, you lose the human form of life and fall to a lower species. This is, again, we see in the Bhagavatam's going back through this cycle and making it again clear to us. Next verse, Vedic civilization. Good news coming up. So we get the sense gratification, the futility, and the falling down to lower species, and it sounds terrible, but always the good news comes. And then we get inspiration and we think, yes, I should be doing Bhakti Yoga. I better get more serious about it, and so on. And Bhagavatam keeps encouraging us on. It says, Vedic civilization provides the Shastras to guide us to live a regulated life. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma, religious life. Not ill-gotten money through cheating and degradation and so on, but a pious type of gaining income so that you can get sense gratification. Sense gratification, Krishna has not got a problem with that. If you want sense gratification, Krishna is giving it, no problem. But if you live piously and do things correctly, you'll get more sense gratification. That's what you want. Krishna is always trying to fulfill the desire of the living entity. So that's how we should do it. But then the next verse says, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Don't just do pious activities to enjoy sense gratification, but at the same time cultivate this higher understanding that there's liberation from this stuff. Not just going to higher planets and keeping going. Yes, but be interested in the liberation factor. So we're just interested in liberation. Then that becomes a problem too. Coming advanced to higher states of life is not sufficient. They afford no permanent existence. Sanat Kumar again looks back. So again, we have another look back. The Bhagavatam is going in that direction. It goes back. He gives explicit details of the living entities' entanglement in this material nature. He talks about the oneness of a living entity with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then points out, so we heard earlier that we could have that oneness and give up the separate focus on a separate identity, separate from the Lord and functioning in that way. Now Bhagavatam says you have to be careful when you have that concept that you don't become bewildered and that this is not the Mayavad concept of oneness without differentiation. The Bhagavatam explains that again. Then it says in text 39, devotees, by always serving the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, easily overcome the hard-knotted desires for fruit of activities. The Gyanis, the yogis cannot. And there's the famous verse that in the 10th canto Bhagavatam says, Yenyera vindaksha vimuktamaninas, tvayasta bhavad avisuddha buddhaya, arura krishena. Krishena means very hard, very difficult, severe austerities. So the Gyanis and yogis, they laugh at the bhaktas. The bhaktas, they're not austere. They eat all this prasadam and they eat this, that, and all kinds of luxurious foods. We just eat khichdi with no salt practically. Who cares? They're very austere. They think they're liberated from all of this attachment or attraction to anything. So they perform great austerities, but they become illusioned into thinking that they're completely liberated. But Bhagavatam says they will fall again from that position because there's no shelter. There's no ultimate shelter there. You can go into the sky. Prabhupada used that example. You may have a Sputnik or a spacecraft in the sky. So you can fly in the sky. But you can't stay there forever. You have to go back to a planet. In a similar way, we can go high in the sky with our thinking and speculative processes. But we're not impersonal. We are persons. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Person, and we are all individual persons. And that shelter is the only ultimate liberation. So that is explained. And goes to great lengths in that point. Then Prithu Maharaj in the next verse advises to take shelter of the boat of those lotus feet of the Lord, to easily and safely cross the ocean of material existence. It is love that has to be developed. Yes? And that is not an easy thing, to develop that pure love. We were reading the other day the story in Krishna book. Prabhupada tells the story there in the Krishna book of the wives of the Vedic Brahmanas. It's a very, very nice one to read. The Vedic Brahmanas were performing the sacrifice, and Krishna and the cowherd boys, right? The cowherd boys were a little hungry. You get hungry too, if it suits the pastime. And the only way we can understand all of this when we get into these things of cowherd boys being hungry, but they've not got mature bodies, why would they be hungry? The only way to understand is to hear from the great acharyas, and to hear from the Lord himself, and to embrace the realizations of such acharyas. Because they have systematically and scrutinizingly studied all the revealed scriptures. They are not sentimentalists. They thought that of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prakashananda Saraswati thought he's simply a young sannyasi, and he's dancing like a sentimentalist and crying. He should study Vedanta. That is the duty of the sannyasi. Like that, they were seeing in that way. But then we know the story about Chaitanya Charitamrita, that Lord Chaitanya, a very beautiful way. It's said that he was so magnanimous that he allowed Prakashananda Saraswati to take him to a sitting place. The Lord took his place in that assembly of sannyasis at the place where they washed the feet of everyone as they came in. It was not a very exalted place to sit. So the Acharyas explained that he did that so that Prakashananda Saraswati would come and ask him to come closer to him. He felt embarrassed that this sannyasi has come, and they were also very attracted by Lord Chaitanya's effulgence. He was so brilliant and attractive and beautiful, so attractive, that Prakashananda said, please, please come, sit. And that was called Agata Sukriti. Unknowingly, he performed the pious activity or the meritorious credit of devotional service. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also was the greatest logician in India, in the world. And when he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he again thought, he's such a young boy. He's taken sannyas at such an early age. Why did he do such a foolish thing? You will become so proud, people will offer you respect, and you will gradually become bewildered by all this adoration and so on. So maybe I should speak Bhagavatam to you. I should speak from Shastra to you and give you knowledge and depth. So he spoke. Lord Chaitanya listened in great humility. And then after a week or so of hearing, Lord Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, you're listening, you're hearing, but are you listening to what I'm saying? Does it make sense? Are you not asking any questions? Lord Chaitanya said, yes, I'm hearing everything, but what your explanation is very, I'm not interested in this explanation. And then he went on to explain everything to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He gave so many explanations of different verses, to the point where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was clear that this personality is the supreme personality of Godhead. Nobody else could explain what he has explained. And that great logician Sarvabhauma became Lord Chaitanya's ardent devotee. So Preacher Maharaj was took shelter of this boat. We'll go on to text 42. 43 is the verse for today. So Preacher informed the Kumaras of Lord Vishnu's prediction that the Kumaras would soon come to advise the king. Out of compassion, the Lord appears in his different incarnations. And Prabhupada quotes that Lord Buddha appeared out of compassion for the animals. Lord Nrsimhadev appeared out of compassion for Prahlad, who was being tortured by his demonic father. And this is the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He will either appear personally or he will send his intimate devotees out of compassion to guide the fallen conditioned souls. So Prithu Maharaj is showing this example then of his complete surrender, where he sees everything belonging to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he possesses nothing. He has no separate interest, and his only interest is to hear from the Kumaras, to hear from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then to situate himself perfectly in harmony with the instructions of the Supreme Lord and the great acharyas. And what happened when he did that was that the whole world was blessed. Good fortune was there for all the citizens. So much so as we see that they wanted to give jewelry, wanted to give gifts to the king. Wouldn't it be nice if our leaders were of such a caliber? We want a one world order. Yes, there should be a one world order. And that one world order should be led by a king like Prithu Maharaj, or an administrative executive head, doesn't have to be a king, who is well versed and trained. And the first thing to be trained in, that everything is owned and controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not Russian, it's not Chinese that own it, it's not the Americans that own it, it's not whoever. It's owned by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if we can make that adjustment in the world, and we want to change the world. It's said that you can't change the world unless you have changed countries. The countries make up the world. You can't change a country unless you change different regions of that country. You can't change the regions or cities unless you change communities within that. And you can't change a community unless we change ourselves. It comes back all the time to ourselves. That if we can gradually keep working on this platform of Bhakti Yoga, the only panacea for all ailments and difficulties, and keep working on it and hearing, then gradually we could be in complete harmony with the Supreme Lord. And when that happens, we'll actually be in harmony with all other living entities. There's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna states that. I didn't look it up, so I can't remember it right now. But at the end, he's saying all these things. Devotees are completely absorbed in me, they worship me, and they come to me. And the last line of the verse, it says, and are friendly. That's the qualifications. And the last qualification, Krishna said, and are friendly to all living beings. It's such a qualifier, because the tendency I have is to be always thinking, yes, Krishna, Krishna, I have to be good to Krishna and good to the pure devotees, great acharyas, but being friendly, and I've said this many times also, it says, be friendly to every living entity. And we think, yes, those ants, those little animals, and I'm friendly. But the devotee across the way, the devotee who doesn't agree with you, who has a different opinion maybe about something, I'm not so friendly to them. That's usually one of the biggest tests. I think there was something on the internet a few months ago, jokes, Krishna conscious jokes. As all the devotees are up in the spiritual world, and devotee turns up and they say, I'm sorry, I'll have to ask, my wife helps me here because she's here. I'm going to ask her to help me. I'm terrible at remembering these. You know how that one goes? I think it was Mahatma put it up there, wasn't it? How did you get here? Yeah, I can't, yeah, how to tell it, but it's basically you get up and, oh, you get up and go back home. Oh, he's up here. How did he get up here? Then why are you looking at me? He said, we're all wondering how you got here. So many aspects to Krishna consciousness, isn't it? And that's why the Bhagavatam is reviewing it and looping back into it all the way. So we hear, we can go high into Bhakti Yoga. We think, yes, yes, yes. But tomorrow we forget and we lose it. So we have to hear it again and again and again and again. But it's not boring. It's exciting. Remember, we're Jivara Swarapoi Nityara Krishna Das. We're that eternal, blissful, living entity, full of love and compassion and care. So we just have to bring it out. And then when it goes back in, you got to keep trying to bring it out, and give up the fear. Wow. Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha. We have to give up the fear. We're fearful to be vulnerable, to give love, because we'll get hurt. We've been hurt. Hands up if, no, I won't say that, because everyone's hand will go up. I don't want to embarrass you. You know what I don't even need to say it. We've all been hurt in different ways, and the tendency is to close down, shut off. These are my people that I can love and care for, and the other ones, whoa. So and the answer, and the question may come, oh, how do I do that? Answer, read the Bhagavatam. If we can do all the things, engage in the service, it'll all happen. It will. Okay. So we'll ask if anyone has any reflections. I know it's getting, another few minutes. If someone's got something that they want to reflect back, maybe some correction if I've said something, or any specific question. Prabhuji. Good, I'm glad it's not just me that saw that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like some kind of apparent contradiction. If you read the purport of both these verses about 3 or 4 times, you'll start to kind of get it. As I said it right earlier, it's very subtle, these things. And please, I'm going to pause that question. It's still there. It's there. You just reminded me of a story of which I mentioned. It's very connected to this. Mukunda Maharaj, when he was, what was Michael? He was Michael Grant. So back to Michael. Srila Prabhupada was eating something, because this talks about remnants of food, yes? So Srila Prabhupada was offered some dates. So Srila Prabhupada ate one piece of the date, choose one piece of the date. And then he gave it back to Michael, Mukunda Maharaj, to be. He gave him the date. So Mukunda, or Michael at the time, said, oh, what am I supposed to do? He's eaten this. He wasn't thinking of founder Acharya of ISKCON. He was thinking, the Swami's eaten this and he's given it to me. He didn't know what to do with it. He had no idea. What do you do if somebody gives you something? Yeah. So he wasn't very fully conscious of Srila Prabhupada at that time. He knew he was the Swamiji. Give me this date. So he thought, "Oh, he must want me to have some, so hey, fair enough." So he ate a bit, and then he thought, well, what to do? And so he handed it back to Srila Prabhupada. He handed it back to Srila Prabhupada. Now you might ask the question, which just rushed into my brain. Damn, sorry. Been avoiding this piece of cable. If you could make that cable a bit longer over it, Nima, if that was longer, it would help, because every time you do that, you just about break it. Anyway, anyway, Nima does such a wonderful job, so it's not a criticism. And I want to apologize to the kartals. These kartals, I was talking about the string, they worked perfectly. They were really good kartals. So apologies to the kartals. So the question that rushes in to my mind is, what did Prabhupada do with it then? He's eaten, Mukunda's eaten, give it back to Prabhupada. Can you remember it all? Is it in there? I don't know if the person in the book, it's in, whose book is that? Shyam Sundar's book? Or sorry? Mukunda Maharaj's book. Okay, so he tells us stories. I don't know if he did. We have to find that out. What did Srila Prabhupada do with it? I don't know. So back to the question, yeah? So let me answer in some way. One way would be that there's Prithu Maharaj was manifesting through the other verses. That's why I've discussed a lot of these verses, because there's a whole context to the discussion. So he's manifesting this platform of complete detachment from everything, from his body, from his kingdom, from everything. And he knows that, and actually, if you go on further, there's more. So those two verses are there. Then there's another 3 or 4 that deal with this whole subject as well. And it will tease out more of an understanding. He realizes that everything should be given, and that under the direction of the Brahmanas. The next following verse, he speaks very much about the Brahmanas and their exalted position as the representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's caught in and we might find, oh gosh, it's a great idea. We will find ourselves in these kind of situations too, where it will be very hard to see what should be done. Exactly. You think, but I should do that, but if I do that, that will affect, oh, maybe I shouldn't say because of, yeah, we'll be, what's the word? Tested to know how to do and what to do in a specific circumstance. We hear that in the Bhagavatam, isn't it? When Ashvatthama was killing the children, that somebody wanted the Draupadi wanted the head to be to stand on the head. Bhima was saying, it has to be killed. And Draupadi said, no, don't kill him. He can't be killed. And Arjuna had the task of knowing what to do. And the purport to those verses explains a lot of that discussion of trying to deal with a very difficult situation we might find ourselves in. I hope that answers your question in a 1%. The other 99 is in there. Good luck. Any other question? Okay, so we'll finish there. Is there any announcement to make? We do happen to be having a little breakfast this morning, special breakfast on a special occasion for a special lady. Any other specials? Somebody else wants to special occasion? Okay, so we'll go to Prashadam, and then we can, Madhu's going to maybe say hello to everyone down there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Krishna Krishna.